"If you can translate this, I'll marry you right now," laughed the millionaire. But she read it and silenced them all. Emily Johnson carefully polished the crystal glasses as guests filled the main hall of the Thompson mansion. Yet another party where she'd be invisible to the eyes of the wealthy, just another maid serving champagne amid loud laughter and talk of million-dollar deals. That's when the glass slipped from her trembling hands and splashed onto the genuine Italian leather shoe of William Thompson, heir to the most powerful real estate empire in New York City. The three blonde companions who always surrounded the businessman burst into cruel laughter, pointing at Emily as if she were a circus animal. "How clumsy!" shouted Victoria, the tallest of the three, adjusting her low-cut red dress. "Can't they even hire a maid who knows how to hold a glass?" William raised his hand, calling for silence, but the wicked smile on his face showed he was enjoying the scene. His eyes traveled up and down Emily, noticing the yellow rubber gloves she wore to protect her hands from cleaning chemicals. "You know what, girl?" he said, walking toward an antique carved wooden bookshelf that dominated one wall of the hall. "I'll give you a chance to make up for this misstep." The other two companions, Amanda and Brittany, stepped closer curiously, tossing their blonde hair and adjusting their identical red dresses. The entire hall began focusing on the scene, as if it were the night's main entertainment. William picked up a yellow document, its edges worn and its antique script seeming to dance under the golden light of the crystal chandeliers. The paper carried the scent of decades stored in dusty drawers. "This document here is very old," he said, waving it in the air. "It's written in Latin. If you can translate this word for word, I'll marry you right now, in front of everyone." The hall erupted in laughter. Victoria doubled over, leaning on Amanda's arm. Brittany clapped as if watching a comedy show. Other guests whispered among themselves, some snapping photos with their phones to capture the public humiliation. "Just imagine," Victoria cackled. "William married to the illiterate little maid. She probably doesn't even know what Latin is," Amanda added, wiping tears of laughter. William tossed the document onto Emily's gloved hands with a dismissive flick. The paper landed heavily in her palms, as if carrying the weight of centuries. "Well, sweetheart, will you try or will you admit you're just an uneducated cleaning girl?" Emily held the document carefully, her hands trembling slightly, not from the humiliation or the mockery around her, but from what her eyes recognized the moment they focused on the first line of text. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past in her hands. That handwriting, those archaic Latin words, she knew them well. Very well. Ego, Anthony Johnson, pater familias. She began reading in a steady, clear voice. "I, Anthony Johnson, head of household, declare through this document that the lands situated between the Hudson River and the Hudson Highlands, measuring 300 acres. The laughter died gradually. First Victoria stopped, then Amanda and Brittany. The guests began murmuring in confusion. William felt a chill in his stomach, though he didn't yet fully grasp what was happening. "Are the rightful property of the Johnson family, acquired through legal purchase in the year of our Lord 1872. Emily continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident. "This document serves as a definitive and irrevocable deed." "Enough," William shouted, trying to snatch the paper from her hands. "You memorized this from somewhere." But Emily stepped back, shielding the document against her chest. Her tears were not of humiliation, but of a deep pain she had carried for years, a pain that now found its voice. "With witnesses to this transaction being Mr. John Thomas Thompson," she went on, looking straight into William's eyes, "and Michael Sanders, recorded at the Manhattan Settlement Registry Office." William's face paled. The Thompson surname wasn't there by chance. John Thomas Thompson was his great-grandfather, the man who, according to family stories, had built the Thompson real estate empire from the ground up, buying land for a pittance in 19th century New York City. "Impossible," he murmured, trying to process what he was hearing. "This document is signed in the presence of God and men, with notarized signature and seal of the kingdom. Emily finished the translation, her tears now flowing freely. Anthony Johnson, October 1872. The room was utterly silent. Not even the sound of the chandelier crystals swaying could be heard. Mrs. Catherine Thompson, William's mother, who had been watching everything from the upper balcony, slowly descended the marble staircase, leaning on the gilded railing. "My God," she whispered, stepping closer to Emily. "Johnson, you are—" "I am the great-granddaughter of Anthony Johnson," Emily replied, wiping her tears with the back of her yellow gloves. "The one whose land was stolen by your family." Victoria, Amanda, and Brittany exchanged nervous glances. The entire party had stopped. The waiters held their trays, unsure what to do. The pianist had stopped playing. Even the noise from the kitchen had ceased. William grabbed a gilded chair and sat down heavily. His mind raced, trying to piece together a story he thought he knew. "This is a lie," he said, but his voice was weak, lacking conviction. "My great-grandfather bought that land legally." Emily opened the small purse she had hidden under her apron and pulled out a yellowed folder protected by clear plastic. Her hands no longer trembled. "I've had a copy of this document for 5 years," she said, holding the paper for all to see. "And not just this one. I have letters, receipts, certificates, everything that proves how your family deceived mine." She opened the folder and spread the documents across the Carrara marble coffee table. Old photos, birth certificates, handwritten letters, maps of the region. "I don't work here by chance, Mr. William," she continued, her voice now steady and resolute. "I've worked here for 3 years, cleaning every room of this house, organizing every paper in your files, searching for proof of what your family did to mine." Mrs. Catherine approached the documents, putting on her reading glasses. Her experience as administrator of the family businesses helped her recognize the authenticity of the papers. "William," she said quietly, "these documents appear genuine." "They can't be," Victoria cried, trying to defend the man she hoped to marry someday. "She made all this up to get money." Emily looked at Victoria with a calm but determined expression. "I have a master's in history and a specialization in paleography," she said evenly. "I work part-time as a professor at Columbia University, teaching about historical documents from the American colonial period." The three women fell silent. William rose from his chair, pacing back and forth like a caged lion. "If you have a master's degree, why are you working as a maid, he asked, trying to find a flaw in her story. "Because my mother has Alzheimer's and needs private treatment," Emily replied, carefully putting away the documents. "The medications cost $2,000 a month. My teaching salary didn't even cover half the expenses. That's why I took this job, even knowing who you were." Mrs. Catherine slowly sat down in a blue velvet armchair. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed everything. "Emily," she said softly, "what do you want from us?" "Justice," Emily answered without hesitation. "Just justice. My family lost everything. My great-grandfather spent the last years of his life suing you, but your lawyers always found ways to delay, complicate, and make everything so expensive he couldn't afford it." She pointed to an old photo she had placed on the table. "This is Anthony Johnson with my great-grandmother Mary and my 2 great-great-grandfathers as children. They lived with dignity on that land. They raised cattle, grew coffee, had a simple but honest life. Until your family showed up with forged documents and bribes for judges." William stopped pacing and looked at the photo. Even in black and white, you could see the dignity in the faces of that humble family, posing in front of a modest brick house. "Can you prove the documents were forged?" he asked. Emily smiled for the first time since the party had begun. It wasn't a happy smile, but the smile of someone finally being taken seriously. "I have 5 years of research, Mr. Thompson. I know exactly which notary office falsified the records. I know which judges were bribed. I even know how much each one was paid to look the other way." She pulled a yellowed letter from her folder, protected by a plastic sleeve. "This is a letter from your great-grandfather to a corrupt lawyer, explaining how they would solve the Johnson problem. It's signed and dated. The handwriting has been authenticated by 3 different experts." Mrs. Catherine reached out asking to see the letter. Tears began to fall as she recognized her own father's handwriting. "My God," she murmured. "I knew something was off about the story my father told about the land. He always changed details when we asked." William sat down again, this time on the edge of the armchair, resting his head in his hands. His entire life had been built on a lie. All the money he spent, all the parties he threw, all the arrogance he displayed, it all came from land stolen from a humble family. "What do you want?" he asked, not lifting his head. "Money. Compensation. I want you to publicly admit what you did," Emily replied. "I want my family recognized as the rightful owners of that land, and I want other families who were wrong to get justice too." Victoria could no longer hold back. "Other families? What other families?" Emily looked at her with an expression mixing pity and determination. "You think my family was the only one?" she asked. "In 5 years of research, I found at least 12 families who were cheated the same way. Some lost everything and never recovered. Others still live in poverty because of the Thompson family's crimes." The room was completely silent now. Some guests had discreetly left, not wanting to be part of such a delicate situation. Others stayed, fascinated by the night's dramatic turn. Dr. Andrew Miller, the Thompson family's lawyer for over 20 years, quietly approached the group. "May I see these documents?" he asked professionally. Emily handed him the papers. "Doctor." Miller put on his glasses and examined each document carefully, checking stamps, signatures, dates. His expression grew more serious with every paper he analyzed. "Mrs. Catherine," he finally said, "these documents are authentic, and not just that. They constitute irrefutable evidence of fraud, forgery, and corruption." William jerked his head up. "What does that mean, Doctor?" "It means that legally the lands never belonged to the Thompson family," Dr. Miller explained. "If these documents are presented in court, you will have to return not only the original lands, but also pay reparations for all profits earned from them over more than a century." Victoria paled. Her mind raced. If William lost his fortune, she would lose her chance at $1 million marriage. How much would that be?" William asked weakly. Dr. Miller did some quick mental calculations. "Considering the current value of the lands in the Hudson Highlands and the profits from developments built there, we're talking at least $200 million, just for the Johnson family. If the other families also take legal action..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood they were looking at the complete collapse of the Thompson empire. Mrs. Catherine slowly stood and walked over to Emily. Her tears fell freely now, smudging the carefully applied makeup she'd worn for the party. "Emily," she said, her voice breaking, "I ask for forgiveness. On behalf of my family, I ask forgiveness for what we did to you." Emily looked into the older woman's eyes and saw something unexpected, genuine remorse. "Mrs. Catherine," she replied softly, "forgiveness is important, but it's not enough. There must be justice too." "I understand," Mrs. Catherine nodded, "and you will have it. We will make this right no matter the cost." William stared at his mother as if she'd lost her mind. "Mother, you're talking about giving $200 million to this... to her." "To this courageous and honorable woman," Mrs. Catherine corrected him firmly. "This woman who worked as a maid for 3 years to support her sick mother, even with a master's degree. This woman who could have blackmailed or extorted us, but came here seeking justice the honest way." William looked at Emily as if seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her, not just glancing at an invisible servant. You planned all this?" he asked. "I planned to gather evidence," Emily replied. "I didn't plan for you to hand me the original deed during a party." "How did you know the deed was here?" "I didn't. I searched every room in this house, every file, every drawer I was allowed to clean. I never found anything but copies and recent documents. The original deed was on the library shelf for 3 years, but in a box I could never open." William remembered taking the document from that very box earlier that day, wanting to impress the guests with family heirlooms. "It was fate," Mrs. Catherine murmured, "or perhaps divine justice." Victoria, Amanda, and Brittany exchanged nervous glances. The party had turned into a nightmare for them. Their chances of securing a wealthy marriage were slipping away before their eyes. "William," Victoria said, trying to regain some control, "you're not seriously going to believe this story, are you? She's just a maid trying to take advantage of your kindness." Emily looked at Victoria with a calm but firm expression. "Miss," she said politely, "I can prove every word I've said. I can show you my master's degree, my published articles on paleography, the forensic reports on the documents. What can you prove about yourself other than being here to land a rich husband?" Victoria was speechless. Amanda and Brittany also didn't know how to respond. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Dr. Miller cleared his throat discreetly, drawing attention to himself. "If I may," he said, "I'd suggest we discuss this more calmly in a more private setting. This is a delicate matter involving complex legal aspects." "No," Emily said firmly. "I want this done here, in front of everyone. My family was publicly humiliated for over a century. It's only fair the truth is revealed publicly too." William stood again, but this time not to pace nervously. He walked over to Emily and stopped in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. "You're an incredible woman," he said sincerely. "Smart, brave, determined, and I've been a complete fool to you." "Yes, you have," Emily agreed without hesitation. If we fix this, if we return what rightfully belongs to your family, could you—" He hesitated. "Could you forgive me?" "That depends," Emily replied. "Forgiveness is one thing. Trust is something else entirely." "What do I need to do to earn your trust?" Emily thought for a moment, glancing around the luxurious hall, at the three nervous companions, the embarrassed guests at Mrs. Catherine waiting anxiously for her answer. "First," she said, "you'll return the land to my family and all the other wronged families. Second, you'll pay all reparations without needing a lawsuit. Third, you'll do this publicly, admitting your family's mistakes and asking for forgiveness." "And fourth?" William asked. "Fourth," Emily smiled slightly, "you'll learn what it means to work honestly. You'll start at the bottom of the family business, as an office boy, earning minimum wage, for at least a year." Victoria, Amanda, and Brittany gasped. "An office boy?" Victoria shrieked. "William, you can't possibly accept this." "I will," William replied, never taking his eyes off Emily. "I'll accept every condition." "Are you insane?" Amanda protested. "You're a millionaire, the heir to an empire." "I'm the heir to an empire built on lies and theft," William said firmly. "It's time I learned how to build something honestly." Mrs. Catherine stepped closer to her son and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said. "For the first time in years, I'm proud of you." Dr. Miller began jotting notes in a small notebook. "I'll prepare all the legal documents," he said. "This agreement can be formalized by the end of the week." "No," Emily said. "Before any legal agreement, I want to see real commitment. Words are easy, actions are harder." "What do you want me to do?" William asked. "Tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, you'll be at the company's front door, dressed like any ordinary employee, ready for your first day as an office boy. If you show up, I'll know you're serious." "And if he doesn't?" Victoria asked hopefully. "If he doesn't," Emily replied, "the documents go straight to the press and the district attorney's office, and then it won't be a friendly agreement. It'll be an all-out legal war." William extended his hand to Emily. "Deal," he said. Emily looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment before shaking it. "Deal," she repeated. The three companions realized the party was over for them. Victoria was the first to leave, angrily slinging her designer bag over her shoulder. Amanda and Brittany followed, whispering to each other about how they'd wasted their time with William. The other guests also began discreetly making their exits. The party had turned into something far more serious and personal than they had expected. When the hall was nearly empty, with only Emily Johnson, William Thompson, Mrs. Catherine, and Dr. Miller remaining, the silence was broken by a familiar voice. "Emily?" An elderly woman appeared at the hall's entrance, leaning on a cane. "What's going on here?" It was Mrs. Rose, the housekeeper for over 40 years. She had raised William since he was a child and knew all the family's secrets. "Mrs. Rose," Emily exclaimed, rushing to help the woman. "You shouldn't be here, it's too late." "I heard the commotion from upstairs," Mrs. Rose explained, "and I recognized your voice talking about the Johnsons." Everyone looked at the housekeeper with curiosity. "Do you know the story?" Mrs. Catherine asked. Mrs. Rose sighed heavily. "I know it very well," she said. "My mother worked for the Johnsons when I was a child. I saw when they lost everything. I saw the sorrow, the despair. My mother cried for weeks." William stepped closer to the woman who had been like a second mother to him. "Why did you never tell me this, Mrs. Rose?" "Because you were just a boy when you heard the story," she replied. "And later, when you grew up, you became so arrogant, I knew you wouldn't believe me." Mrs. Rose looked at Emily with affection. "But you have your great-grandfather's eyes. I recognized them the first day you came to work here. That's why I've always treated you so kindly." "You knew who I was?" Emily asked in shock. "I suspected," Mrs. Rose confirmed. "And I hoped that one day you'd find the courage to seek justice." William fell silent, processing yet another revelation. The woman who had raised him had known the truth for years and never said a word. "Mrs. Rose," he said softly, "I'm trying to make amends for my family's mistakes. Can I count on your support?" The housekeeper looked at him with a stern but maternal expression. "William, I've cared for you since you were a baby. I watched you grow up, watched you graduate, watched you become a man. But in recent years, I've also watched you become arrogant, selfish, and cruel to the staff." She paused, leaning more heavily on her cane. "If you truly want to change, if you truly want to honor the memory of your father and grandfather, whom I also knew, then yes, you'll have my support. But this is your last chance, boy. The last one." William nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mrs. Rose, and I'll earn your trust." Dr. Miller closed his notebook. "Well," he said, "I suggest everyone go home and rest. Tomorrow will be a long and important day. Emily, would you like me to review the documents more carefully?" "Of course," Emily replied. "But I'd like the review to be done in the presence of an independent lawyer as well. I want everything to be transparent." "Fair enough," Dr. Miller agreed. "I know several competent colleagues who can oversee the process." William looked at Emily one last time before everyone said their goodbyes. "Emily," he said, "do you really believe I can change?" She studied him for a long moment before answering. "I believe anyone can change, Mr. William. The question is whether they truly want to, or if they're just pretending. How can I prove I really mean it?" "By showing up tomorrow at 7 in the morning," she replied simply, "and every day after that." The next morning at 6:50, William stood in front of the office building where the Thompson companies were located. He wore simple dress pants, a plain white shirt and basic black shoes. No gold watch, no diamond cufflinks, no Italian tie. At 6:55, Emily appeared, walking down the sidewalk. She had swapped her maid's uniform for a discreet professional outfit, a black blazer, black pants, and comfortable flats. "Good morning, Mr. William," she said formally. "Good morning, Emily," he replied. "May I call you boss?" She almost smiled. "You can just call me Emily, shall we?" They entered the building together. In the elevator, William asked, "What exactly will I be doing as an office boy?" "Everything an office boy does," Emily answered. "Delivering documents between departments, serving coffee in meetings, organizing files, answering phones, making copies. And you? What will your role be?" "I'll oversee the land restitution process. Mrs. Catherine offered me the position of Director of Historical Reparations." William nodded, trying not to show surprise. His mother had made that decision without consulting him, but he understood it was the right thing to do. The elevator stopped on the 12th floor. When the doors opened, at least 20 employees were waiting in the reception area. News of the party the night before had spread quickly among the staff. "Good morning, everyone," Emily said clearly. "I'd like to introduce our new office boy, William Thompson." A murmur ran through the group. Some employees looked at their former boss in disbelief. Others smiled discreetly, remembering all the times he had treated them with arrogance. Sarah Olson, the administrative department supervisor for 15 years, stepped forward. "Mr. William," she said, testing how it felt to address her former boss as a subordinate. "Your first task is to organize the files in the basement. There are about 500 boxes that need to be catalogued and sorted by date." William swallowed hard. 500 boxes in the basement was hardly glamorous work. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, trying to maintain his dignity. "And William," Sarah continued, "here you'll be treated exactly like any other employee. No privileges, no special treatment. Understood?" "Perfectly," William nodded. The first few days were humiliating. William carried heavy boxes, sorted dusty papers, and cleaned shelves. His hands, used only to signing documents, grew rough and dirty. His back ached from lifting. But something interesting began to happen. For the first time in his life, William was truly getting to know the company's employees. Not just the directors and managers who always surrounded him, but the people who actually made the work happen. He met old Jack from Records, who had worked at the company for 30 years and had never had a conversation longer than 2 minutes with him. He met Mrs. Margaret from cleaning, who supported 5 children on her salary and always arrived an hour early to make sure everything was perfect. He met Charles, the IT technician, who had suggested several improvements to the company's systems, but had never been able to present his ideas to the board. "Why didn't you ever come to me before?" William asked Charles during a coffee break. Charles gave a bitter laugh. "Talk to you? Mr. William, you walked past me every day for 5 years as if I were invisible. Once I tried to approach you in the elevator to suggest a system change that would save $40,000 a month, but you cut me off saying you were busy." William vaguely remembered the incident. At the time, he had been more concerned about a date with a model than employee suggestions. "Tell me about that idea now," William said. "Now?" Charles seemed surprised. "Now." Charles explained how the company was paying for expensive software that could be replaced with free versions offering the same functionality. With a few simple adjustments, the savings would be substantial. "Why has no one implemented this before?" William asked. "Because managers get commissions from the current vendors," Charles answered simply. William felt a knot in his stomach. His own company was being drained from the inside by schemes he had never bothered to investigate. At night, after his first day of work, William came home exhausted. His clothes were dirty, his feet ached, and calluses were beginning to form on his hands. Mrs. Catherine was waiting for him in the living room. "How was it?" she asked. "Humiliating," William answered honestly, "but necessary." "And what did you learn?" William sank heavily into the armchair, thinking about his answer. "I learned that I knew nothing about my own company," he said. "I learned there are incredible people working for us with brilliant ideas I always ignored. I learned I'm wasting a fortune on corrupt suppliers I didn't even know existed." Mrs. Catherine smiled. "Your father would be proud," she said. "He always said a businessman only truly knows his company when he knows every employee." "And the restitution process? How's it going?" "Emily is doing an amazing job," Mrs. Catherine replied. "She's identified 8 more families who were wronged. She's organizing everything so no one has to go to court. She wants to resolve it all amicably." "She could have destroyed us," William murmured. "Could have leaked everything to the press, filed million-dollar lawsuits, caused a national scandal. But she chose the path of peaceful justice. She's a special woman," Mrs. Catherine agreed. "And you're starting to see that." In the following days, the office boy routine continued. William carried boxes, organized files, served coffee in meetings, but he also observed everything with new eyes. He saw how the board's decisions affected employees. He saw how small savings could mean better working conditions. One Thursday afternoon, William was sorting files when Emily appeared in the basement. "How are you adjusting?" she asked. "Better than I expected," William answered, wiping sweat from his brow. "And worse, too." "How so?" "Better because I'm learning things I never knew about the company. Worse because I'm realizing what a terrible boss I was." Emily sat on an upturned crate, keeping him company. "Want to know something?" she said. "The employees are talking about you." William stopped sorting papers. "Talking about what?" "That you're different, more human. Sarah said yesterday you asked about her sick daughter. Jack from Records said you remembered his birthday. Because I never paid attention to them before, William admitted. It was like they were machine parts, not people. And now I see each one has a story, a family, dreams, worries. Mrs. Margaret from cleaning is studying at night to finish high school at 55. Charles from IT invented an app in his free time that could help the company. Sarah has a daughter with special needs and never mentioned it because she thought she'd be fired. Emily nodded. And what do you plan to do with that information? When I go back to the board, William paused and corrected himself. If I go back to the board, I'll make changes. I'll implement Charles's ideas. I'll give Mrs. Margaret time to study during work if needed. I'll create a health plan that covers Sarah's daughter's needs. And if your mother doesn't let you return to the board? William smiled sadly. Then I'll find another job. I'll use what I've learned here to be a better employee somewhere else. Emily studied him for a long moment. You're serious, aren't you? Completely serious, William replied. For the first time in my life, I'm completely serious about something. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 3 weeks later, Emily organized a special meeting in the company auditorium. All the families who had been wronged by the Thompsons were invited, along with all the employees and local press. William was nervous. He had rehearsed his speech countless times, but he knew the right words were only the beginning. Actions were what truly mattered. When it was his turn to speak, he stood and looked at the roughly 100 people gathered in the auditorium. My name is William Thompson, he began, and I'm here to ask for forgiveness. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For over a century, my family built a fortune through lies, fraud, and corruption. We stole land from honest, hard-working families. We built an empire on the suffering of others. He paused, studying the expressions in the audience. Some showed anger, others curiosity, others hope. I could say I knew nothing, that I was deceived just like you. But that would be another lie. The truth is, I never bothered to find out. I lived in wealth without questioning where it came from. In the front row, Emily watched every word, every gesture. Beside her, Mrs. Catherine wept silently. That's why I'm here today to announce that Thompson Enterprises will return all the stolen land. We'll pay fair compensation for every loss caused, and we'll do this without lawsuits or lawyers. Spontaneous applause broke out. Furthermore, William continued, half of the family's remaining assets will go toward creating a foundation to support families who've lost property through fraudulent schemes across New York State. The applause grew louder. And to ensure this is done properly, with full transparency, I invite Ms. Emily Johnson to oversee both the restitution process and the new foundation. Emily stood, receiving a standing ovation. Ms. Emily Johnson is a descendant of one of the families mine wronged, William explained. She could have sued us, destroyed us, humiliated us publicly. But she chose justice and reconciliation instead. She's an example of dignity I intend to follow for the rest of my life. As the applause faded, an elderly woman stood. I'm Mary Johnson Sanders, she said firmly, granddaughter of Anthony Johnson. I want to know if this is real or just another act to fool us. William looked at her with respect. Mrs. Mary, he replied, I understand your distrust. That's why all the documents are already signed. The property transfers are recorded. The compensation is deposited in a national bank account for each family. These aren't promises. They're done deals. Mrs. Mary sat slowly, too overcome to speak. A middle-aged man stood. I'm a lawyer, he said. I represent 3 families here. How can we be sure there are no hidden clauses, no fine print? Emily rose to answer. Dr. Miller, she said, every document was reviewed by 5 independent attorneys, including a bar association representative. There are no clauses, no conditions, no fine print. This is full unconditional restitution. A young journalist raised her hand. And what about Mr. William? What's his financial situation after all this? William smiled for the first time that evening. I'll work honestly to earn my living, he said. I'll remain an employee of the company, now under new leadership. I'll use my experience to help repair the harm my family caused. But didn't you inherit anything? The journalist pressed. I inherited a moral debt, William replied. a debt I intend to pay by working for the rest of my life. After the meeting, when most people had left, William approached Emily. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Relieved," she answered. "Exhausted but relieved. 5 years of research, 3 years of work, and we finally achieved justice for everyone. And now? What happens now?" Emily looked out the auditorium window, watching the families outside chatting animatedly, some hugging, others crying with happiness. "Now we keep working," she said. "There's still so much to fix. The foundation needs structure. Other families might come forward with claims. The social projects need planning." "And us?" William asked softly. "What happens to us?" Emily looked at him, no longer seeing the arrogant businessman who had humiliated her at a party, but a man who had undergone a genuine transformation. "We'll keep working together," she replied. "We'll see where that takes us." Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" he asked hesitantly. Not as boss and employee, not as rich and poor, just as two people who went through something difficult together. Emily thought for a moment. "All right," she said, "but I picked the place." "Of course. And we split the bill." William smiled. "We split the bill." 2 years later, in the same auditorium where William had publicly asked for forgiveness, another meeting took place. This time, it was to present the results of the Johnson-Thompson Historical Reparations Foundation. Emily, now the foundation's executive director, shared the numbers with an even larger audience than the first meeting. "In 2 years of operation," she said, "we've identified and repaired injustices against 43 families. We've returned properties worth over $300 million. We've created jobs for more than 500 people. And we've established a protocol now being used by other organizations across the country." The applause was warm. In the front row, Mrs. Catherine watched with pride. Beside her sat Mrs. Rose, now 82 but still sharp and engaged. "But most importantly," Emily continued, "we've proven that it's possible to right historical wrongs without violence, without hatred, without revenge. Justice can be done with love." William, sitting in the audience alongside other company employees, he'd been promoted to social projects coordinator, felt deep emotion watching the woman he admired more each day. After the presentation, during the reception, William approached Emily. "Congratulations," he said. "You've achieved something incredible." "We achieved it," she corrected. "This was teamwork." "Emily," he said, slightly nervous, "can I talk to you privately?" They stepped out into the company garden, a green space created as part of the new social projects. "What is it?" she asked. William took a deep breath, knelt down, and pulled a small box from his pocket. "Emily Johnson," he said, "you taught me what dignity, justice, and true love mean. You turned me from an arrogant, empty man into someone who wants to matter. Will you marry me?" Emily looked at him kneeling in the garden under the soft evening light. 2 years ago, he'd proposed as a mockery. Now he was proposing as a declaration of love. "William," she said gently, "get up." He stood, still holding the box. "It's a no?" he asked, fear in his voice. "It's a yes," she replied, smiling. "But I want our marriage proposal to be different. I want it to be a partnership of equals, based on mutual respect and shared goals." William smiled with relief. "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes." They kissed under the garden trees, discreetly watched from the building windows by dozens of employees who had followed their entire journey. Mrs. Catherine, from her office window, wiped away a happy tear. "Mrs. Rose," she said to the housekeeper beside her, "they're going to be happy, aren't they?" "Yes, they are," Mrs. Rose replied, "because they've learned that true happiness comes from doing good for others, not from having money in the bank." The wedding ceremony took place 6 months later, in the same hall where it had all begun, but this time the hall was decorated simply and elegantly, without excess. The guests weren't wealthy businessmen and their gold-digging companions, but families who had been helped by the foundation, company employees, and true friends. Emily entered the hall arm in arm with her mother, Mrs. Carroll, who had recovered surprisingly well from Alzheimer's after the family's financial stress eased with the compensation they received. William waited for her at the makeshift altar, dressed in a simple suit without any showiness. Beside him stood Dr. Miller as his best man, and in the front row, Mrs. Catherine and Mrs. Rose wept with emotion. The priest who officiated was from the local parish, where William now volunteered every weekend. "Emily and William," the priest said, "you met in a time of conflict, but you turned that conflict into justice, and justice into love. May this be an example to us all of how it's possible to turn wrong into right." During the vows, William spoke first. "Emily, you taught me that true wealth isn't in the bank, but in the hearts of the people we touch. I promise to be your partner in life and work, always striving to do good and build a fairer world." Emily responded, "William, you showed me that anyone can change, as long as they have the courage to face their mistakes and the determination to make them right. I promise to be your companion on this journey of turning our pain into hope for others." When the priest declared them husband and wife, the hall erupted in heartfelt applause. But the most moving moment came when old Jack from the mailroom, now 72, asked to speak. "I've worked at this company for 42 years, he said, his voice trembling. "I've seen a lot of good and a lot of bad, but I've never seen anything as beautiful as two people fixing the world with love." Mrs. Carroll, Emily's mother, also wanted to speak. "My daughter has always been brave," she said, "but seeing her turn injustice into justice and then justice into love makes me sure I raised someone special." Mrs. Catherine was the last to speak. "My son was arrogant, selfish, and lost," she said without hesitation, drawing laughter from the crowd. "Emily turned him into the man I always wanted him to be. That's why she's not just my daughter-in-law. She's the daughter I always wished for." The celebration that followed was simple, but joyful. Live music with guitar and accordion, food made by families helped by the foundation, decorations with flowers from the company garden. There was no expensive champagne or golden plates. There were sincere hugs, genuine laughter, and stories of resilience shared by people who had regained their dignity. During the newlyweds' dance, William whispered in Emily's ear, "Do you regret anything?" "Not a thing," she replied. "And you?" "I only regret taking so long to know who you really were. But if you'd known me earlier, would you be the same person you are today?" William thought about the question. "Probably not," he admitted. "I needed to go through all of that to learn to appreciate you." "Then don't regret anything," Emily smiled. "Everything happened at the right time." 5 years after their marriage, the Johnson-Thompson Historical Reparations Foundation had become a national reference for historical reparations. Emily was invited to speak at universities, and William had written a book about his personal transformation, donating all royalties to the foundation. They had 2 children, Anthony, named after Emily's great-grandfather, and Catherine, named after William's grandmother. The children grew up regularly visiting families supported by the foundation, learning early on the value of justice and solidarity. One Sunday afternoon, the family gathered in the garden of their home, a simple, comfortable house without any pretension. Emily read to the children while William prepared the barbecue. Mrs. Catherine, now 78, but still active as a foundation advisor, watched the scene with satisfaction. "You know what amazes me most," she said to Mrs. Rose, who at 87 still lived with them. "What?" Mrs. Rose asked. "It's that they're genuinely happy," Mrs. Catherine replied. "William has a much simpler life now than before, but he's 1,000 times happier." "Because now he has a life with purpose," Mrs. Rose observed. "Money without purpose is a burden. Money with purpose is a tool." Emily looked up from the book she was reading to the children. "What are you two talking about over there?" she asked. "We're talking about how you're proof that even the worst situations can be turned into something good," Mrs. Catherine answered. "It wasn't easy," Emily said. "There were moments I thought about giving up, suing you, and ending everything at once." "What made you choose the harder path?" Mrs. Rose asked. Emily thought for a moment, watching William playing with the children in the garden. "Because revenge destroys the one seeking it too," she said. "Justice builds a better world for everyone." "And now," Mrs. Catherine asked, "are you happy with the choices you made?" Emily looked around, the children playing happily, her husband transformed into an honorable man, their home full of love. the work that gave her life meaning. "More than happy," she replied. "I'm fulfilled." Just then, 4-year-old Anthony ran up to her. "Mommy," he shouted, "Daddy said you're the bravest woman in the world." "And what do you think?" Emily asked, hugging him. "I think it's true," Anthony answered. "But Daddy's brave too, right?" "Why do you think Daddy's brave?" "Because he said sorry when he did something wrong," the boy explained with childlike wisdom. "Grandma Catherine said only really brave people say sorry for real." Emily smiled, looking at William as he approached with 2-year-old Catherine in his arms. "You know what?" she said to her son. "You're right. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard." William joined them, sitting beside his wife. "What are you all talking about?" he asked. "About courage," Emily replied, "and how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments." "How so?" "If you hadn't humiliated me at that party," she explained, "I'd never have had the courage to show the documents. If I hadn't shown them, you'd never have changed. If you hadn't changed, we'd never have truly fallen in love." William kissed his wife's forehead. "So you're saying I should have been an arrogant jerk?" "I'm saying everything happened the way it was supposed to," Emily smiled. "What matters is that we learned from our mistakes and built something beautiful from them." Mrs. Rose, who had been silently observing the conversation, murmured, "Now that's wisdom." The sun was setting, painting the garden in golden hues. William held Emily's hand, watching the children play under their grandmother's loving gaze. "Emily," he said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me when I didn't even deserve your compassion." "William," she replied, squeezing his hand, "thank you." "For what?" "For having the courage to become a better person." At that moment, Catherine climbed down from her father's lap and ran to Emily. "Mommy," she said with her still slightly garbled speech, "tell story." "Which story do you want?" Emily asked. "Our story," Anthony shouted, joining his sister. "Tell how you and Daddy met." Emily and William exchanged glances, smiling. "All right," Emily said, "but it's a long story. Are you sure you want to hear it?" "Yes," both children chorused. "Then here we go," Emily began, settling the children beside her. "Once upon a time, there was a very fancy party at a beautiful mansion, and at this party, a very rich man thought he could humiliate a very brave woman." "And then?" Anthony asked eagerly, even though he already knew the story. "Then that brave woman showed him that you should never judge people by appearances," William continued, "and taught him that true wealth comes from the heart, not the bank." "And they got married," Catherine finished, clapping her hands. "They did," Emily confirmed, "and lived happily ever after." "No," Mrs. Catherine gently corrected. "They didn't live happily ever after. They chose to be happy every day. That's very different." "What do you mean, Grandma?" Anthony asked. "Happily ever after is for fairy tales," Mrs. Catherine explained. "In real life, we have to choose to be happy every day, even when things get hard." "And do you choose to be happy?" Catherine asked. Emily and William looked at each other, thinking of all the challenges they had faced together, the initial resistance from some family members, the difficulties of structuring the foundation, the moments of exhaustion and stress from their intense work. "We choose," William answered. "Every day we choose to be happy, to be grateful for what we have, and to work to make the world a little better." "And that's why you're the coolest mum and dad in the world," Anthony declared, making everyone laugh. When the children went to bed, the adults stayed on the porch, gazing at the stars. "You know," Mrs. Rose said thoughtfully, "I've seen a lot in my life. I've seen rich people die empty and poor people die fulfilled. I've seen marriages of convenience last 50 unhappy years and love marriages last 50 happy years." "And what's the difference?" Emily asked. "The difference is purpose," Mrs. Rose replied. "When we live for something bigger than ourselves, life has meaning. When we live only for ourselves, life feels empty." "And do you think our life has purpose?" William asked. "You've helped over 100 families regain their dignity," Mrs. Catherine listed. "Created more than 1,000 jobs, established a model of justice that's being copied across the country, raised 2 children who are learning strong values. How could that not be a life with purpose?" Emily stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the illuminated city below. Sometimes I think, she said, about what would have happened if I'd chosen revenge that night. What do you think would have happened? William asked, joining her. You would have lost everything. My family would have gotten the land back, but I probably would have become a bitter person. Revenge satisfies for a moment, but then leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And now? Now I sleep peacefully every night, Emily smiled, because I know we're building something positive out of what was once negative. William hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Do you have any idea how much I love you? He whispered. About the same amount as I love you, she replied, melting into his embrace. Impossible, he said. No one could love someone more than I love you. Wanna bet? She teased. I do. What's your wager? I bet that tomorrow morning I'll love you even more than I do today. And I bet that tomorrow morning I'll love you even more than I do right now. Then we'll both win the bet, Emily concluded, turning in his arms. They kissed under the stars, discreetly watched by the two women who had followed their journey. Mrs. Rose, Mrs. Catherine whispered, they'll be all right, won't they? They will, Mrs. Rose replied with certainty, because they've learned the secret to true happiness. What's the secret? The secret is that happiness isn't a destination, it's a way of walking. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story of transformation and justice. Do you believe people can truly change like William did? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between revenge and forgiveness? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories about overcoming challenges and true love.